So another interesting week in the Pac-12, I guess you could say. This is more the Pac-12 that we normally get, Mark Thomas, a conference where you literally have no idea what's going to happen week to week, because I thought about this schedule and I thought about these games when I was doing my week 4 previews or week 5 previews, and I'm looking at it, I'm thinking to myself, all the favorites look like they're very easily going to win this week. And what happens? We have like 3 major upsets, and we end up in a situation that we're in now. So, first off, I want the report. How did the Fighting Mark Thomases do this weekend?
Not too good, man. The triple option got us. We actually played them pretty good in the first quarter. Then some bad injuries happened. I think one kid fractured his tibia. Then one kid had a high ankle sprain. So a lot of stoppage and momentum, so we couldn't really get it going like we could have. But yeah, I mean, this is the toughest team we played all year. So hopefully we can get back, finish the season out, knock them out 3 in a row, 6-3 season. That's what I'm banking on.
That you know what, 6-3 is a good way to end. That's a good solid foundation on which to build your program and your freshmen. I see it.
Absolutely.
So one group that similarly got burned by injuries this week was Oregon, but that was, kind of part of the story. Injuries, just sloppy play overall, subpar quarterback play. The officials got involved at the end. It's a very, very weird game in Stanford. Give me like your immediate takeaways. Just first, what it does for Oregon, and what, if you're watching that game on tape, you got to go back to the drawing board and like fix.
Yeah, I mean, it's an easy fix. Like, just some, like, it's injuries you can't, obviously you can overcome injuries, but at the same time, it just comes down to being able to put your players in the best position. The guys who have to step up in those positions, you have to just put them in the best position to be successful in. As far as like Oregon as a whole, like, I think it was just a lot of like bad play calling. Like, they just wasn't executing the way that I thought they could execute. Like, Stanford didn't do anything. They were very vanilla in their defensive schemes. Like, it wasn't anything spectacular that they did. I think the offensive line played pretty well. I mean, obviously it was a struggle with that front seven of Stanford, but I think Anthony Brown, he just wasn't on the money yesterday. He got a live arm, but he just wasn't making the throws when he needed to.
It's funny because I look at that particular game, and this is Stanford's always been a team that Oregon has had, trouble with in certain spots. And it makes a lot of sense, right? Because this just feels like what we all thought it was going to be for the Pac-12. What drives me crazy is that if Stanford doesn't blow that first game of the year against Kansas State, we're talking about a 4-1 Stanford team that's probably going to be ranked when the AP poll comes out. And like, that is the exact reason of why you need to win your non-cons. We went back onto a couple plays too last night on our game night show, and Oregon, like, the game wasn't called horribly, and that's with their offensive coordinator being out. Like, Joe Moorhead wasn't at this game with a non-COVID related illness, but they still put themselves in positions to do well. They didn't execute, especially in various spots. Their starting center was out, and I also think, and you as a coach, I think, can attest to this. I don't think we as people talk about how important that center position is enough on a field. And when you lose your starting center, how big that is.
Oh, easily. That's like your quarterback up front. He's calling out fronts. He's calling out the blitzes. He's calling out slants. He's calling out everything. And if you don't have that veteran guy, that veteran presence, it's just something about the veteran presence in the trenches. That's just like, I can rely on this guy to do his job, so I'm going to do my job. And if I'm doing my job, the tackle's going to do his job. It's just being cohesive as a unit. I think people, like you said, it's an overshadowed position. Like, people just think a guy just hikes the ball and just block. No, it's way more to that.
Was there anything that stood out to you in that game, whether that be from Stanford's play or with Oregon's play, that looked maybe unfamiliar from what the last 4 weeks have looked like?
I didn't think Oregon. I thought Oregon was. I would have thought this game would have been the game for Oregon to just dominate and show their presence in the pack. But I just think that's just good it's a testament to how good the Stanford culture is. Like, yeah, they were down in the first couple of weeks of the season, but they didn't let that overshadow what they had going forward in the season. Like, they didn't let the Kansas State loss affect their future and their position in this conference. And them going out there and playing at home, of course, it's tough to win in Stanford State. Like, I don't think it's very hard to win in that stadium. And then, David Shaw obviously establishing that coach and those guys buying into it. You saw it on the field yesterday.
What's so weird about that stadium too is it's not like a normal college football environment, because you go in and you expect that there's, all these raucous fans and that the stadium is going to be sold out. And what's so odd is that it's not. And I always think that the energy in there, it's like this weird energy in that stadium. And I think that throws teams off, because you're expecting when you go on the road against a program like Stanford to walk into a place that is a hard environment, right? Like, you're expecting to walk in to a place like a Utah or even a Colorado, and you don't. You just, there's like no one there. It's just a very weird atmosphere, which I would imagine it's hard to get jacked up in an atmosphere like that. Anthony Brown, I think a lot of people look at, there was a column this morning by one of the local guys here basically saying that going into the bye week, Oregon is going to need to reevaluate that position and potentially start looking at Ty Thompson as a starting quarterback. Are we sold on Anthony Brown here as a starter moving forward, or is it time in the bye week to maybe start tinkering with something on the back end of the season?
I mean, I wouldn't just discard him just yet. I mean, he got you the Ohio State victory. He played a very good game that game. He's been playing good up to this point, and it's like once Moorhead's out the picture, it's like you got a new play caller in. Like, some of the stuff that just didn't make sense. Like, it's 4th and goal, you're on a 1, and you're going out of shotgun.
Yeah.
Or even if you do go out of gun, like, there's so many other plays you can run besides just like QB draw, QB sneak. It's a QB power, There's so much other stuff. You just like call it that like regular play. And like Stanford kind of knew, okay, this like the situation. Okay,
Yep.
Like, he's getting the ball. There was no misdirection, no motion, no nothing. So like Stanford just kind of, you didn't make Stanford think. They just like play ball, and that's just one of the things that just comes with play calling. That's why I always say, like, whenever people watch football, or if you're in that football culture, the one thing is, if the quarterback looks bad, the play calling time, 9 times out of 10, is probably bad.
Yeah. Well, what's crazy about that play, that's the one that's going to get used against him a lot, is he had the pitch, and I don't know. And Mario Cristobal said that it was a design pitch that he just took, and like Verdell's got wide open space there. And that's the thing that I think when we go back and talk about execution of this team, I don't think you lay it all on the feet of Anthony Brown. I do think you have to maybe reassess like just how firm of a starter he is potentially. But even the 2nd and 18, we looked at this last night on the film, and that call is the right call. Like, it's about 2 minutes left in the 4th. It's a pass call that people think it looks like a design screen that gets blown up. It's actually not. And what ends up happening is Stanford has a better play call in that particular moment, in that situation, where they slant their 4-eye, and that blows up the play essentially. And that play, if done right, you have Micah Pittman wide open over the middle, like 13 yards downfield, which very well gets you a first down or puts you in like 3rd and 5, 3rd and 6. The issue was execution, as was the 4th and goal. Like, it's an execution issue where I think the thing that I don't like about this Oregon team is like, I don't know where that starts, because execution is fundamentally a mental thing for a lot of people and a lot of players. And I always hesitate to put games on players, because more often than not, it is not their fault. But this team we saw it earlier in the year, whether it was Stony Brook or Arizona, like, they played down to competition a lot. And when you start flat, you let teams build leads and get ahead of you in that respect. So is this an issue, do you think, if you're a player here, or if you're a coach or a position coach? Are you looking at your players like, we need to mentally reset going into the bye week, like how we prepare and how we approach these games?
I mean, I think that's always one of the things that could, especially going to the bye week, going over like what's wrong. Like, I think that's a time for the coaches to have to come together and like what went wrong in this first quarter of the season. Like what went wrong, one way or right. Let's maximize our strengths, minimize our weaknesses. I think this is that time right now going into the bye week. And then as far as play, I think it's just coming together. Like I said, if these players come together and they realize like how great they could be as a team collectively, I think everybody buys in into what their job is and responsibility. And once they do that, I think everything will be fine. Like, I mean, I wouldn't write Oregon off for the playoffs just yet. You know, I was a decent Stanford team. That was a pretty hard-nosed Stanford team. I hope they don't count that against them. You know, this is a good Oregon team, but it's just, you know, you just have some mishaps in the process. That's just how it goes. Like everybody can't be Alabama. You know, you just got to give them a chance to regroup. And can they dominate the rest of the season? If they can dominate the rest of the season, I don't see why they can't be in the playoffs.
Yeah, I mean, look, I don't think one loss kills them. The only thing I think for Oregon is based on this game and based on the amount of injuries they've had. I mean, because this is, you know, bordering on ridiculous. There's no Justin Flowe's going to be out. Bennett Williams, who's the other safety on this team, opposite Verone McKinley, who's been just amazing this year. He's got a long-term injury. CJ Verdell's injury, we don't know the prognosis yet, but Mario Cristobal said in the postgame it's likely to be long-term. There's plenty of other guys, whether that's Braden Swinson, Jackson LeDuc, Keith Brown was a little dinged up. You've got some guys on the offensive line, as we mentioned, Alex Forsythe, their center. He's hurt. So I think because of the amount of injuries, more than anything else, I think their path to the playoff is gone in the sense that I think they're definitely dropping another game or two here in the regular season. You know, if they were fully healthy and this was just like an aberration, bad game from them, then yeah, I could say, all right, you run the table the rest of the way, you're going to be fine. I don't think they have it to run the table the rest of the way in this conference. There's just too many teams that could trip you up on a good day if you're not playing up to your best now. And I hate the Pac-12 for this very reason, because they don't figure out who they are until like week 3. And by then it's too late because you've already lost your non-cons. And now all of a sudden you're beating teams that you probably should have beaten, you know, normally, or had good games against normally. But because their record sucks, it looks like a significantly worse loss than it is, a la this Stanford game. So I think Oregon probably has 1 or 2 losses in there. They're now 3rd in the Pac-12 North standing. Stanford a half a game up with a 2-1 record. Just they've had another game in conference. Oregon State, though, man, 2-0 in the North, 4-1. I think they're probably going to be in the ranking this coming weekend in the AP poll. We talked about it last week for just they're a staff that schemes their guys into positions to win, and they did it again this week. Good coaching by Jonathan Smith, run out the clock down to 1 second, get the game-winning field goal on a chip shot. They get the 4th down stop in the 4th against Washington, and that allows them to put themselves in the position to win. This Oregon State team, man, they're greater than the sum of their parts. And I feel like sometimes, I don't know what the rest of this season has in store for Oregon State, but sometimes when you have a team that's greater than the sum, they are the guys that end up doing the best out of anybody else. Like this team, I think, is special.
Running backs matter. Running backs matter. You saw, right? You saw last night. There was nothing Washington could do with this Oregon team when it came to the run game. These guys are special in the trend. They are a special group. And if they can stay healthy, man, they can go a long way. I mean, hopefully, I want to say playoff, but they could probably get a New Year's 6, man. Like this team is special. Like Chase Nolan had the best game, but the fact that your running game was able to step up like that, man, that's amazing in itself. Like even Washington, Well, I know we're not talking about Washington just yet, but even they ran the whole, had Sean McGrew. Even though how old is Sean McGrew? I think we got to be about the same age. It feel like he's been there since for 8 years.
He's been around for a bit. He's got to be a senior now, I think.
Gotta be. I remember watching him at St. John Bosco, watching his highlights. But they had Sean McGrew running the rock. Dylan Morrison, he couldn't really do anything in the passing game either. So it was just one of those just run the rock times. That's the type of game it was, But Oregon State, man, they're special, bro. If they can keep this up, man, I'm hoping for good things up there for them, the Corvallis, man.
So Sean McGrew, by the way, he was the Gatorade Player of the Year in California in 2015. So he is a 6th-year senior, I believe.
That sounds about right.
Yeah, it makes sense. Now, what's cool about what Oregon State is doing offensively, their tight ends are really good. And I didn't notice this until I was sitting with one of our analysts who's he's a coach and a total film junkie, man. He just mainlines his stuff. And I'm looking at some of these running plays and I'm like, it is amazing how they're schemed to do this the way they are. And he goes, well, look at the tight end play. And so we go through a play, I drop it into my editing software and we just kind of like go through, frame by frame slow-mo. And dude, their tight ends are unbelievable. Like the push they get on blocks, the holes that they open, the edges they set, like they might be the best tight end room in the country. And it's one of these things where in today's college football landscape and in football in general right now, I think the way the game has gone, we think of the tight end as a Travis Kelce-esque type of position where we don't really realize like guys like Kelce and Gronk, like they are as good as they are because they were also really dynamic guys that could block in the run game. How important is that? Or actually, let me rephrase that. How overlooked do you think tight ends are in that respect?
I mean, because of the way the game is today with all this spread and crossing routes and spacing that football has now, people forget about the power eye or the mail and all of these these power run formations. Like the tight ends are very crucial in that regard. Like if one messes up, that's just like the offensive line. If one messes up, they all mess up. They all screw up. But having that tight end that's athletic and that can block and get up and can reach, seal off the edge and get up to help combo block, get off to backers to the second level, that's crucial. Like if you can get a guy to do that, that expands your offense. That expands your run game in so many ways.
Yeah, and that's what has seemed to be going on at Oregon State. It also helps that like they're RBU, bro. Like we like maybe not the elite of the elite RBU, but there is a line you can trace with that program that starts at Ken Simonton and goes to Steven Jackson and goes to Quiz Rogers and goes to Ryan Nall and AP and Jamar Jefferson and now BJ Baylor. Like, if I'm a running back low key, like I want to go to Oregon State because like they're going to put me in the league. The amount of guys that they have had for the last 20 years at this point that have been high tier, high level running backs is astounding at this level. BJ Baylor last night, another 111-yard game. This is the 4th game out of 5 he's played where he's had at least 2 touchdowns. And this is the 3rd 100-yard game he's had so far this season. He's 81 carries, 533 yards, 9 touchdowns through 5 games, bro. Like, that is ridiculous for a running back. And somebody who we didn't think was going to be like that guy coming into this year to this level.
Yeah, he's a pro. I think he's a pro. I mean, he has great vision. He reads blocks very well, but that's a testament to the offensive line, like we always say. He's just a dynamic runner of the ball. He doesn't go down. He runs the ball like a running back's supposed to. He doesn't go east and west and try to shade. No, once he reads it and sees the hole, he takes off. He's straight downhill, and it's hard to tackle him, man. He's a good running back.
So, by the way, I'm looking through these just general running back stats of like guys that I'm going to go look through the career rushing records at Oregon State just to give people an idea of like the type of people we're talking about in this. And pretty much it's all of the guys that we mentioned, right? Simonton, Quiz, Jackson, Jefferson, Null's in here, AP's in here. Then, you go into like the mid 2000s, you had Evanson Bernard, you had Storm Woods, guys that weren't necessarily NFL caliber dudes, but like Iverson Bernard was a 3,000 yard rusher in his college career. He had 3 back-to-back-to-back 1,000-yard rushing seasons. Storm Woods had, 2,500 yards over his career and 25 touchdowns. Like these guys, they build running backs at this university. And not only do they build running backs, but Jonathan Smith in this offense, they know what they're doing in crafting a running game, because this was a game where, again, you didn't need Chance Nolan to be incredible. And we actually, surprisingly, haven't needed that out of him just yet. I think the closest you got was in the Hawaii game where he threw the ball like 30 plus times, but you haven't needed him to bail you out of a game when the running game isn't working, because the running game is working so well, which is such a weapon, man. Because you look at like a UCLA or an Oregon for that matter, they've had games where they've needed their quarterback to bail them out. And Oregon State at this point has played good defenses now. Like there's enough of a sample size there to tell you that they can just do this to anybody, it seems.
Yeah, I mean that just comes with the offense. That just comes with being efficient. Like you don't have to pass the ball 50, 60 times a game to try to win a football game. You don't need to do that. Like this is what you have running backs for. It's what you got your receivers for. It's a collection of talent you have to piece together to make. Let's see what works and what doesn't work. Everybody isn't Lincoln Riley. Everybody isn't everybody doesn't have the talent like Alabama does, so you have to just work with what you got. And Jonathan Smith and the staff just did a great job of just making this offense efficient and work cohesively at the same time. Like everybody has the talent, but everybody's not great at that. You could just take a look at LSU and Auburn and all these other teams that have 5-star talent out the world, but they're not efficient. That's not efficient football down there. That's bad football down there.
Yep. So Sean McGrew, by the way, at 100 plus, on his own. What do we make of Washington? Because, what bothers me about this game, and I'm going to do this with everybody pretty much in this conference, Washington, you don't lose that game to Montana. You're 3-2. And your losses are to an undefeated 5-0 Michigan team and a 4-1 Oregon State team that also, you should argue, probably should also be 5-0 right now because they lost their non-conference game to Purdue. So Washington, I think, still has a path. I think I can still see 8-4, 7-5 out of them. It seems like they're starting to figure it out a little bit more offensively, but even then, there's some play calling stuff there that I don't like. I don't think John Donovan's their guy at OC. I just don't.
He went Wildcat all pretty much like towards the end of the game. And it worked. I don't get me wrong, it worked. But if you have to go to, I won't call it Wildcat trickery, but if you have to go to like, what sort I'm looking for? If you don't go if you have to get your offense out of a non-conventional offense, then something's wrong. Something is wrong with your base offense. Like if you can't run your install plays that you run the first week of camp to perfection, or not perfection, but just to efficiently, then something's wrong. Like I don't think the offensive line is that good, to be honest. Dylan Morris. I don't know. Something's just I just don't know. It's just hard to put my finger on this team. This is my 4th week saying this about Washington. It's hard to kind of put who's the number one, who's your number one option on offense? Like who's your go-to? Where's your go-to offense coming from? And I just haven't seen that.
Yeah.
Besides Sean McGrew last night. Other than that, I don't know.
Well, and I think that's the problem with a lot of offenses in this conference is we just don't know in a lot of respects. And you could say the same about, a Utah or an SC or Cal or any of them. I mean, there's too many teams where the offense is subpar. We had a decent offensive game last night late. Arizona State UCLA, ASU beating the Bruins 42-23. UCLA drops to 3-2. Arizona State's 4-1. They lead the Pac-12 South now. I think it was finally nice to see Arizona State in a game that was a little bit more indicative of who they are. I think that BYU game, they got jumped by a very good BYU team, but then they had 3 games on the schedule that you don't really know how good they are because they're playing Southern Utah, they're playing UNLV, they're playing Colorado, who were all terrible. And so you're like, okay, who is Arizona State really? I think at least for my money, we found out a bit. To you, who is Arizona State?
I think Arizona State's a great team. Like I underestimated them just off the BYU level, but BYU, I took advantage of how I thought BYU would drop off because they don't have Zach Wilson. But the fact that program has been consistent for pretty much this decade, right? And that the BYU team that beat Arizona State is a great BYU team. But ASU coming back in the pack, I think they kind of realized what they needed to work on. They just need to just continue to do what they do, work hard, play ball. Like, I like the Arizona State team. Like I think Jaden Day is starting to figure it out. I think this receiver core is starting to figure it out. I think this defense is starting to figure it out a little bit. Like once they start to get the ball rolling, I think it's going to be this might be an ASU, USC type of. It might come down to those two. So I mean, I think Herm and the staff do a great job of just scheming like they did yesterday. I think they just out-schemed and outplayed UCLA yesterday. I don't think UCLA was really ready for what ASU had.
I think getting Trayanum back was huge because that's very much the other side of that rushing attack. Is they like using Rashad White, but Trayanum is there as kind of that second guy, change of pace. They use him not the same way, but in terms of production, it's very much the way Oregon State has Deshaun Fenwick there, where, he's a change of pace guy. You can use him in pass pro. You can use him as run protect. Like he is a very good running back in his own right, but you just have the ability to balance both of those guys if you want to. And I think this is a lot of cleanup for ASU, right? Like they cleaned up a lot of the penalty issues. It still wasn't perfect, but they cleaned up a lot of that, cleaned up a lot of the drops. Ricky Pearsall had a great game. This is more the ASU that I thought we were going to see going into this season. As for UCLA, I mean, this is UCLA. Like this is, the guys that are UCLA fans and reporters that have been covering the team forever. Like this is the exact type of game that we lose. And it's a bummer because late into last night, the last hope for the conference really was UCLA. And now they're not in it anymore. So I think we're just got to resign ourselves, Mark Thomas, to the fact that this is just going to be a lot of 8-4 teams beating up on each other without one team really at the top here, I think.
And this is a shame, man. Like I really thought Oregon was going to be the team. Like this is the year the Pack is back in the playoff, and it's like they go and lose to Stanford, and the UCLA, obviously BLSU had the momentum. Like you got it. Like you got the SEC win, you on top, the media loves you, and then it's like you lose to ASU, which is a good football team, but it's like you just can't have those mishaps, man. Like as much, like I always tell people, it's hard to win a football game. People do not realize, like I don't care if you are supposed to be better than that team, like the team's going to come out and play. Like football is still the game. It's like if you're not prepared to play from a coaching standpoint and a playing standpoint, like it's going to be tough. And then. Man, oh boy, it just sucks, man. Like I really was hoping for the Pack to be in the playoff, man.
Yep. Well, yeah. Before I go into that, Cal loses to Washington State. I honestly, I don't know what's going on with Cal. I love Justin Wilcox as a coach, but 22-23 over the 4 or 5 years you've been there, and you get outclassed by a Washington State team that hasn't looked like they've had a pulse this entire year, and that's happening at home. That kind of thing is just not acceptable, and it makes you question what the entirety of the tenure has been for. Colorado gets smoked by USC. There's really nothing to say there. Aside, I mean, Drake London's a dog and like is a pro player. I guess that's your takeaway, and that USC finally started running the ball well. Keontae Ingram had over 100 on the ground, but Colorado's terrible. They're a horrible, no good, very bad football team. And I think they might legitimately lose to Arizona. I mean, like, this team is butt and their coaching staff is horrible. And I, as an alum, it drives me crazy because I understand the position that they put themselves in or were put in when Mel Tucker left. And I don't begrudge Mel Tucker for leaving, but that is an issue in a situation where you need to find a coach that is better than Karl Dorrell. And now you're stuck with Karl Dorrell for at least another couple of years because the buyout is ridiculous. Nobody was paying that guy $3 million a year to coach. Like, it doesn't make any sense. It's the Lakers giving Mozgov like $80 million type of idiocy in a contract, bro. Like, it is total. It's absurd. It's absurd. And on top of all of this,
$3 million?
Oh, yeah, 3.2. He's the highest paid coach in Colorado history, bro.
We'll talk about that.
We're gonna get to that at one point. Before we do general college football, though, I want to touch on the one thing that we're gonna open the show with is just this is why non-conference is so important. This is why you have to win, or at least a couple of your teams have to win these games. It's why you can't drop stupid matchups like this when you have the opportunity to win them. Because if Arizona State, say, beats BYU, then Arizona State has 2 ranked wins and is 5-0. They would probably be in the top 15 in this newest poll. If Stanford was 4-1 with their only loss coming to UCLA, and at the time UCLA was ranked, they're probably in the top 25 this weekend. Oregon State at 5-0, probably in the top 25 this weekend. UCLA, if they hadn't lost to Fresno State, you could absorb this loss to ASU because ASU, if they took care of their business in non-con, would be ranked. So this would be a ranked loss. So you're 4-1 with a ranked loss. You're still in the top 25. Like, the trickle-down effect from all these games matters because at this point, you could have, if your top 6 teams in the conference took care of what they needed to do, you would probably have 5 teams in the top 25 right now, maybe 6. Because if Washington hadn't lost to Montana, Washington's loss would have been to Michigan, who's undefeated, and Oregon State, who's undefeated. So they probably would have a case to maybe be tapping 25 or maybe being like in the receiving votes category of the rankings. Utah is, ditto Utah. Utah, had they even just managed to beat San Diego State, you didn't even need to beat BYU, but had you beaten them both or had you just won one of those games, you're 3-1 or 4-0, and you're probably ranked 2. Like, that's the trickle down of all of this, because you look at the Big Ten right now, the Big Ten still has 3 5-0 teams. They have 3 4-1 teams. So when those teams meet and they're all ranked together right now, it is number 14, Michigan, number 17, Michigan State, number 4, Penn State, number 11, Ohio State, number 5, Iowa. Those teams, and a 4-1 Maryland, mind you, who's not ranked right now. When those teams play each other, the ranking hit is not going to kill them when they start beating one another because they're already ranked because they took care of their non-cons and were able to put themselves in a position where now all of the wins and losses are quality wins and losses. And the Pac-12 doesn't have that this year again. And it drives me crazy that they just can't get it figured out early enough in the season to win these games. They look lost early in the year, and I don't get why. It's a coaching issue, I think. And I think that's why you probably need to turn over half this conference and their coaches.
Man, I was just looking at the stats right here. As far as non-conference record for the Pac, I also did a combined scores in the non-conference.
What do we got?
So Arizona State went 2-1. They won a combined 95-51. That was the score. They outscored their team 95-51. UCLA 2-1, 119-77. Stanford was 1-1. They still got to play Notre Dame at the end of the season. They were 48-47. USC, I didn't do it. USC was 1-0. They still got BYU and Indy left. So I think that was just the San Jose State game. That was 30-7.
Yep.
Arizona 0-3, went 49 points to the opponent's 83. Oregon was 114-59. Cal was 91-88. UW was 69-44. They were 1-2. Colorado 1-2. They were combined 42. I'm sorry, they scored 47, and then they gave up 42 points. Then they gave up 30 points to a Minnesota team that just lost the Bowling Green. It's probably going to finish last in the MAC. So that really doesn't look good for the Pac-12. Utah goes 1-2. Combined score 76-88. Oregon State 108-48. That's good on Oregon State's part. And then Wazoo went 1-1 in the conference. I didn't get that stat, but as a whole, they went 15-16 in non-conference play. The Big Ten, Michigan. So this is how dominant the Big Ten was in non-conference play. Michigan goes 3-0. They outscored their opponents 141-34. Iowa goes 3-0, 81-38. Ohio State goes 2-1, 128-62. Michigan State, who doesn't really have the firepower of Ohio State, goes 3-0 and had the same exact point as Ohio State, 128-62. Penn State outscored their opponents by like 60 points. Maryland goes 3-0. Rutgers is 3-0, 123-34. Indiana 2-1, 113-83. Minnesota 2-1, 71-40. Purdue 2-1, 92-48. Nebraska 2-1, 96-33. And Illinois, who needs a lot of work, they went 1-2 and they scored 68, and then the opponent scored 93. As a whole, the conference went 29-7 in non-conference play.
That is the difference. That right there that's the difference between getting in a playoff and not getting in a playoff, or having teams in contention to be in a playoff. That's what it is.
Yeah. I mean, I just don't know what it is. Like, what it is about they just can't seem to dominate those games. Like, and I don't know if it's the talent level is just not. Because you got Oregon who dominates, who represents the pack at a high level, and when it comes to recruiting and actually getting players that can play, USC would be second. But the problem is they get guys who don't belong at that level, and I don't. And then once you go from that, it's like a drop off.
Yeah,
and it's like nobody can seem to figure it out. No coach can seem to really dominate this conference except for Mario. And it's like, how can it be fixed? How can it be fixed?
I don't know. That's the $1 million question, isn't it? Mark Thomas, any final thoughts before we roll out here?
Man, Wisconsin is a horrible team. Notre Dame is a horrible team. Like I always told people, they were frauds. Who else? Florida lost to Kentucky. They need to play. They need to start that Richardson kid ASAP as soon as possible, because Emory Jones is not looking like his best self. He has the physical tools, but he just can't get the job done. Well, Ohio State's probably going to be back in the playoff picture pretty soon. Cincinnati,
real.
Yeah.
I know the Michigan agenda's on life support here, bro. I know.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not too worried. They went undefeated back in like 2017. And then the revenge tour year, they roped off everybody. Then they got to Ohio State and got beat by 40 points. So, but this Michigan team is different than I've seen in years past. They're very fast on defense, fastest I've ever seen. So, if they can watch that Oregon film, see what Oregon did to try to contain those guys, that two-headed monster, then with CJ, we'll see what they could do. Speaking of CJ, obviously now we know he can play quarterback, because Ohio State fans tried to have this whole Cal McCord thing and saying like CJ can't play quarterback. He missed this read. I'm like, Jesus, he only played 3 college games. Now he goes out and dominates Rutgers. No, yo, CJ, we love you. We love you. Just miss me with that.
Yep. Fairweather fans, man.
Jeez, I hate
They are who they are.
I hate that fan base. I do not like them. They get on my nerves.
Sir, I'm as someone who was on the other side of that during the Oregon-Ohio State game. Yeah, I can agree with you. Mark, where can we find you on the socials, my guy?
At Mark Money __ on Twitter.
Awesome. And I'm on Twitter at @A_G_Hobner. His name is Mark Thomas. This has been Pac-12 this week, and as always, we'll see you guys next week for the Week 6 recap in Pac-12 country. Mark, thank you as always, sir.
Sir.